Today we're going to talk about your code is agile. Shouldn't your compliance be as well? Take it away.
Sure thing. Thanks a lot, Joe. Yeah, it's super nice to be here, and also thanks to Sean for putting me into contact, you guys. So yeah, as we described, can y'all see my screen? I always do a check, screen
Yep,
check,
I can see.
voice check. All good.
Yeah, if you put it in presentation mode, it'll be, yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So yeah, the topic of today's talk is your code is agile, but what about your documentation? So start out, just a quick introduction about me. Yeah, so my name is Yujan Shrestha, the CEO partner of Analytics. I've been writing code for a good 30 years. It's been paying the bills for 15. I've been doing, and of those 15, software as a medical device. I've been in that specialization for about 12 years. At the start of that, I got my MD, but I always kind of joke around like I did my residency in software development. Spent about maybe like 100 hours a week for like 4 years in like software development. And also after that, I did my fellowship in kind of learning the what it means to create a compliant medical device and software. And kind of here I am today at kind of the crossroads of those two, and also somewhere in that pathway, I also took a detour to do a lot of AI stuff back when this most recent wave of AI came out. I was building GPU servers and kind of doing things the old school way. Now these days, you need a couple of millions of dollars in a large data center to do some more cutting edge stuff, but it was a little bit different back then. I've been involved in several products, about 50 or so medtech software projects that have gone into regulated medical devices in some fashion or another. Here's some of my clients that have had the pleasure or oftentimes displeasure of having to talk with me. This is my team. I'm always super impressed by them. I've learned so much from
Mary
them.
is with you.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I know Mary because she worked with our
Yeah,
dear friend Rob Packard.
yeah. Mary's an amazing team member. I've learned so much from her.
Has
Um,
she left Rob? Is she no longer with him?
that's correct. She's now on our team. She's been on our
Oh,
team for
that was a
about
good coach.
4 months. We did
Okay.
not. It was completely. I think she really enjoyed the culture and the subspecialization of software only medical device. Um, but we've got 18 members of the team. I'm always the one who learns the most from everybody involved there. And really, we have software engineers that are regulatory savvy, but also regulatory consultants that are software savvy. And I think that the crossroads of those skill sets is what allows us to execute on our projects so well. So shout out to the analytics team there. So first, I'll start by what exactly is agile anyway. I think a lot of us hear the term agile software development and agile this and agile that, but what does it actually mean? So by the dictionary term, I'm clearly not agile. But I think neither. I mean, it kind of loosely describes what agile really is. I think it's more on the secondary description. Really, it's about being fully adaptable to external changes, and especially when you're dealing with software. Software, unlike uh, hardware systems or buildings or other things, software is way less constrained by the physical world, and therefore can change much more quickly than you can with like some sort of physical device, right? And therefore, in order to make best use of that, it has to adapt to outside changes, to outside changing business landscapes, and that's what I think being agile is really about. There's this thing called an Agile Manifesto, and this is kind of scoping down more to software development. Agile is more of a set of user needs than it is a concrete implementation of those user needs. You might have heard something like Scrum. Scrum is one implementation of the agile kind of agile philosophy. It's a higher level way of thinking, and it has four key components to it. You have the individuals and interactions over process and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following the plan. Before this kind of agile came into existence, we had what's called waterfall software development. And in that case, all of the business requirements were done up front, followed by the implementation, followed by test, and followed by deployment. Now, the difficulty with that is it's hard to predict the future. At least I haven't mastered that yet in my career. I can't really predict the future. And as software became more and more complicated, we just weren't able to predict all the requirements and ins and outs of the software as needed beforehand. So what ended up happening is you built software that was built with all the standards, that was built right, but it was built to solve the wrong problem. And that's what agile software development was intended to solve, is to break the barriers and the silos between business and the software development team, so that it's more likely that the output of the software dev team is going to meet the business requirements.
John, most of the folks on this call can tell you that my sieve-like brain can remember just a few associations, just enough to say, I know a guy or I know a gal. When I hear the word agile, I think of Kelly Wyrock. You must know him from industry. No?
No.
Yeah, he's given a few talks over the decade I've been doing this on Agile, and that there's sometimes like a warring faction of pro and con Agile folks. And I wonder if, David, that's why your hand is raised.
Well, no, but thanks, Joe. I was wondering, are you talking agile development, quick, fast, let's, get 10 yards down the field? Or are you talking about the noun, the trademarked agile software that, quality management system? I'm a little I don't want to get too lost.
Yeah, it's definitely a great question. And I think that agile, it unfortunately has too many definitions. Definitely the move fast and break things, that comes from Facebook, but that's kind of one manifestation of this. But it's really, I think, one implementation, one interpretation of the agile software development philosophy. That's what kind of gave birth to that move fast and break things mantra. However, it's not a complete analog, right? Like it says working software would obviously move fast and break things. They're more on trying to respond to change. I think that's like that move fast and break things, quote, agile definition there is leaning a lot heavily on the fourth point in this overall philosophy, and I think less so on maybe the second and third. So yeah, I'm not sure if that makes sense. Like that's one manifestation of this, but really heavily weighted to only one of these four concepts. And in like the Silicon Valley mindset, you have to move fast, and you have to leverage what's called technical debt in order to survive. But that's not necessarily the entirety of what Agile Manifesto means. Like it's more about building the right thing versus building it right. So if you move it kind of to like software development for like med devices, it's more make sure your user needs are correct, and you want to iterate to make sure you have those correct, rather than focusing only on like the software requirements themselves, because you might make something that at the end nobody really wants. I don't know if that clarifies anything, but this is more.
That helps. Thanks.
Gotcha. So kind of tying this back to regulatory, and how does the Agile Manifesto tie back? I mean, I think even here, there's kind of several implementations of this, but I think this is kind of where my head's at. So the Agile Manifesto, in individuals and interactions of a process and tools, I think that translates to you want your regulatory culture to be one of collaborative compliance, where, not necessarily having a perfect score in your FDA submission. That's not the goal, right? The goal is to align with the mission of the company and the organization, and ultimately above that, the goal is to help patients as much as we can. But that's, I think, where the software world, what Agile means, kind of translates into regulatory. Similarly, working software over comprehensive documentation, I find that to mean lightweight documentation. So using your tools to automate and streamline being pragmatic about that, I think that's how that same philosophy would translate over. And then you have customer collaboration over contract negotiation. I think regulatory as a stakeholder, like I do lots of pre-subs, and I think that that the FDA is trying to achieve the same thing that all medical device manufacturers should be achieving. Like, we want to produce devices that are safe and effective for the public. So why treat the regulator as an outsider? Treat them more as a stakeholder, right? And always ask why. Like, why do they ask questions like that? They're not trying to just stall development. They've got questions because they have the public safety in mind. And also the final one, respond to change over following a plan. I think this is where a lot of the agile way of doing it, move fast and break things, that's incompatible with how we should be making medical devices. I think Theranos clearly proved this one, that what could happen if you're too agile in terms of medical device development. However, we can certainly take the same philosophy in agile processes, is to allow changes, and really the culture of the company shouldn't be to disallow changes or to make it more difficult for the team to make changes. That should not be the headwind. Like, the headwind should be more of, is this going to meet the demands of the market, and is it safe and effective? Not, oh, we got to like open up this new tool and add this thing that people don't even remember the login to because they don't do it that much. So anyway, it's kind of how I think the Agile Manifesto translates to our industry. So I'll just jump into kind of what can happen if your regulatory culture is not agile. And I'll start with this. Sorry if Bill Gates or Satya is looking at this, I'm really sorry, but Word documents are better than paper for sure, but there's a lot of friction when it comes to editing regulatory documentation in Word or Word-like formats. Like, think about how long does it take to add a requirement, to add a new risk control measure, remove a requirement. These are actions that are performed thousands of times during the development process of a medical device, and beyond that as well. That really micro optimizations with these actions really pay off over time in my experience. This is my son. He's currently 1 year old. He definitely keeps me busy. But Word documents suck. And it used to take.
You featured your son because he was sucking on a pacifier?
Yeah, very yeah. It's I have a very dry sense of humor, I guess. But
I'm just afraid for people who might refer to the deck later, they might think that your son sucks. This is just one man's.
But this is a good type of sucking.
Okay, I mean,
it sucked. Just
show of hands, who likes this? I'll forget it.
Thanks for trying to tie it together.
It's what I do.
Thanks, Joe. So Word documents suck. Like, it used to take me sometimes hours to do some of this stuff, like going through Word documents and finding each one and like removing them and like making sure everything is consistent. But if you use some of the concepts I'm going to talk about on agile documentation management, it shouldn't take you more than a minute to do that. If it does take more than a minute to do some of these things, I would argue that it could be done faster. And I'll kind of go into some more concrete examples and details about how that can be done. Traceability is also terrible. I don't know why a lot of software out there expects you to remember the requirement IDs or just IDs of stuff. I can barely remember my wife's phone number. And I can probably remember 4 things at a time in my head. I think that's kind of my working memory limit. I can't remember IDs, right? And traceability has been one of the most infuriating things about my job, especially given now that we're doing this a lot easier, it's a lot more streamlined. But back then, it was just a lot of time went into keeping your traceability up to date, and ensuring that you are consistent across all your documentation. And I think everyone would agree that's not it's not the reason why we got into this industry. We want to get here because we want to save lives with our devices, not manually tracing requirement IDs all over the place. Right? So yeah, first time I did this, it took me over a week of manual effort to put together a trace report. And now with our processes and procedures in place, and also with our scripting that we built in house, that it takes less than 5 minutes to do that. Silos are also another issue of non-agile cultures, where the regulatory team uses one set of tools, and those tools are incompatible with how the software engineering team uses them, and vice versa. The software engineering team uses tools that the other teams, it just looks like a foreign language to them, right? And this introduces friction to change, which is the antithesis of being an agile in agile culture. And then if you throw in QA, they have yet another tool that they use, some other testing tool, and these are knowledge silos that in the end need to work together. Like this, like all these functions of a business have to work together. But having knowledge silos and tooling silos, I think the tooling silos is what causes the knowledge silos, or at least one major factor of that. And they're just too complicated. Like, because of the data existing in so many places, it becomes a very complicated thing. It turns into something that people are afraid to touch, and that is not agile. Guidance documents, like as an engineer coming up from having to learn these from scratch myself, can tell you that they're extremely abstract to really make use of, or at least if your software team is still new to this process, just handing them a guidance document and hoping that they're able to do all that, that's in my experience, my personal experience, that doesn't work too well, because the guidance documents are so abstract. What's better just to have templates that are a bit more concrete, or to go a little bit further and to make it more concrete for them, to break that knowledge silo down for them, so that they can more easily apply it to their current software development practice. And standards are even worse than that. So I think with all the silos and the back and forth and all the meetings that need to be done, it used to take us about 2 months to do a full release. And this is every release, right? So if you take like how a typical software company is done, right? It's like, oh, they want to release every week. Obviously, we can't release every week for a medical device. However, if you add 8 weeks to that, it really slows things down, and it makes the organization afraid to do a release. Like, maybe instead of fixing a bug or releasing a minor feature, you would have to wait to the next one, right? But with an agile system that we've developed and used in house, we can usually turn around a full release in about a week. So that really lowers the barrier to getting software out and released. And yeah, I think that's been a huge benefit for us. Also, sometimes the outside world changes with no warning. I'm sure you guys have been in like a similar situation where like the FDA decides that they want a different E-Star version comes out, and this always happens at the final hour, right? So like when you're going to be going to submit your E-Star, it's, oh, there's like a new version. What could possibly have changed? And sometimes quite a bit. Sometimes the like one recent example is when FDA requested that security risks be in a separate document than the safety risks. And if you were manually editing Word documents and stuff, that would be quite a painful change. But if you have a more agile system, which I'll speak to a little bit more later about ways that you could potentially implement that, that again should not be that much of a lift. Like, it should take maximum maybe a day to restructure your outputs in order to meet this new regulatory change. So as we know, like it's not a one and done thing, right? It's not a checkbox that you tick off once you get your regulatory clearance. You have to maintain that thing over time, right? So it's not just a one and done thing. So yeah, like I used to have a lot of stress about, like if something changed from the outside, what would we do? But now that we've structured our process in a more agile way, it's a lot easier to make changes and to respond to those changes. Also, inconsistencies, we've probably all been there. You have Word documents being emailed around, but like even with things like with like Google Docs, where you can edit, where multiple people can edit the same document, you still have knowledge duplication spread out over many documents. So even with something like Google Docs, you can still make changes that would break the consistency across all of your documentation. And it always so happens that FDA is the one that finds these inconsistencies, and obviously it's not really a good look on that review. So with all of these, it ends up being a lot of busy work, right? Like ends up being 95% of it is just, to me, felt like busy work, and only a small fraction of it really felt like problem solving. And it really felt like a lot of this was slowing down, getting life-saving medical devices out into the market. It's being slowed down by all of these regulatory processes. And as an engineer, like those same issues that have arisen inside the regulatory documentation space, in software, those would have been a non-starter. Like you cannot, software is so complicated, you cannot build software unless you remove all duplication, or at least remove as much as you can. It's one of the first concepts that is taught to a junior engineer, is to remove duplication, ensure that if you make a change in one space, it's not going to go break something else. But that's exactly what was happening inside the regulatory documentation, and also kind of up to the culture as well. I think that kind of flowed up a couple of levels. So duplication, I felt, was the key ingredient that made the regulatory cultures non-agile. Duplication is great for cupcakes, but not great when it comes to anything else. I mentioned the software engineering concept of do not repeat yourself. It also goes hand in hand with something called technical debt, which basically technical debt is anything that prevents fast changes in the future because of taking shortcuts in the past. And one of those shortcuts is like copy paste. Like if you copy paste a function many different times, that might have saved you 5 minutes now, but come 2 years later, when your code base is like a couple of million lines of code long, that copy paste is going to come back to bite you. So that's the idea of technical debt. And I want to introduce this concept of regulatory documentation debt as well. And it's a very similar thing. I've had cases where the software development team was very hesitant to make changes, and the root cause of those changes is like, oh, we got to go back to the regulatory team and ask them to make these changes in their software or in their system. Or it's like, oh, like we want to add this test which would make the code better, but we don't know how to do that. Or like we have to go in and hand edit on all these Word documents and stuff like that. That is, I think, is another form of debt that's a lot more difficult to conceptualize and solve, because it crosses cross-functional barriers within that organization. See, I think the root cause, so the duplication is like a root cause, but what's the root cause of that? I think it's the not separating the data model from the presentation of the data. And what I mean by presentation is the how it appears on paper, right? So ultimately, you have to submit to a regulatory body, or you need to have something presentable to an auditor or whatnot, and that's the presentation layer in my mind. And there's a more abstract representation of your medical device that lives above that, and you can think of that that's more like your user needs that you're trying to solve, requirements, verification tests, all the standards that you're going to be complying against. It's a lot more abstract. But not separating those two out in lots of organizations, those two are kind of combined, right? But that introduces duplication, where if you wanted to change something within that fundamental abstract data model, you have to change it in the presentation, which you have to do in a lot of different places. And this is why I think Word documents and spreadsheets are not the ideal data model. It's something that should be above that. So in the past, right? Like if you this is what I would do a lot. If I had to add something to the regulatory to the medical device data model, I have to do the Word documents, very manual process, takes a long time, and if you multiply these microtransactions over the course of the entire device development, you're talking years sometimes to prepare all this documentation together. So this is how we currently do it. So we have this medical device data model. Our current implementation, like we use this tool called Notion, which I'm not sure if you guys have used it, but it's basically a second brain. And it's really good at representing data and also representing the knowledge graph and between data. So to trace between different bits of knowledge and also different documents, it does that very well. So it's this web of knowledge that will define our data model. And then we quote compile these down into the final Word documents. So in actuality, we don't really touch the Word documents at one point. We can wipe them all away, recreate them from scratch, or if there's a change to them, like I'd mentioned the cybersecurity eStar change, we just change the script that compiles down the document. So now that script will then split out the safety requirements from the cybersecurity requirements, but importantly, the data model remains unchanged. So this follows the DRY, do not repeat yourself principle. And if you want to make one change, you just make it in one centralized spot. And this is what got our timeline for a 510K from a product with no documentation to about 8 to 12 weeks. It's kind of like the benchmark that we have. And as I'll soon describe, with the help of AI, that I predict is going to come down even further. So the final point I want to make in this presentation. So I think the future is AI. Like I'm not sure how much you guys use AI on like a day-to-day basis, but I predict a future where rather than even this data model even is going to be too concrete, and there's going to be something abstracted on top of that, where rather than manually making changes to the data model, we will go through an AI agent. That this agent consumes context from the outside world, also consumes context from the medical device data model itself. And rather than manually adding risk mitigations, for example, in like this case, it's more abstract than that. You say, hey, agent, I want you to make my device now add some risk controls for this particular type of risk. And then the agent will figure out what actions are necessary to take on your data model that will then reflect that change. I think eventually these AI agents would be able to interact directly with like Word documents and like the presentation there. However, I think this embodiment here is possible today, whereas the other embodiment will still be a couple of years down the road, I think. So if you're interested in making your organization AI ready, then I think moving to this device data model is certainly a pathway in order to get there. So yeah, if you ask me what's the point of all this, I think the point is today how this can benefit you is by speeding up the time to do these micro manual transactions. In the future, how it's going to benefit you is by multiplying that efficiency gain by another 10 to 100x, I believe, is the power of these tools. Yeah, I mean, so like the reason why, I think this is a little bit higher level, like I think that the point is to create safe and effective medical devices, not to get bogged down in the handcrafted mechanics of like documentation. So that's like the main reason why. Like I just saw that there was gains to be had to let me spend more time with what really matters. Also, this is to pursue our mission to accelerate progress in medical devices, and kind of taking that software engineering first approach. That's all this is to help with the ultimate purpose of improving patient health.
Yujan, when a prospect reaches out to you, what are they typically asking for? Because I suspect that the points that you shared today fall in the category of I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah, so when a prospect usually comes to us, they're a lot like where we were 10 years ago, right? Like 10 years ago, in my first medical device I created as a software engineer, there was a lot to learn, right? And they come to us typically with either a product that's already completed or like a prototype, or even sometimes even just with an idea. And to those clients, we help them build out their systems, and also their I think more importantly, build out their culture to become an agile organization, not just in the software. A lot of software development teams these days are already agile by the loose definition of it. But what bogs them down, in my humble opinion, is the heavy paper-based automation, or the heavy paper-based regulatory documentation systems that they end up not wanting to use. Like they don't see the value in it because of it's just that impedance mismatch between the way that engineers think about it and the way that it's typically implemented. So yeah, Joe, I'm not sure if that answered your question about.
Yeah. Rick, you have something to add?
Yeah, I was just reading something this morning, and what you're going through with software really reminded me of what the FAA is going through with SpaceX. It's a completely different generative real-time model of development and improvement. And I was trying to think, what does this remind me of? What does it remind me of? And it reminds me of software development. It's where you're making these continuous interactive changes, and you're getting this explosive development. It reminded me of my friends who do software, and that reminded me of the Agile system. And now that you brought it out this way, it's unavoidable seeing the relationship with those two things. At least I do. But here's the thing: I don't know rockets and I don't know software, so I could be completely wrong. But do you see a relationship between FDA and Agile run things and FAA and organizations like SpaceX?
That's a great analog, and I've heard somewhere, I don't know where I heard this, but perhaps it was Tesla, where it's like it's less of a hardware company than it is a software company. I believe I've also had the same analog to SpaceX, where if you just look at the SpaceX console, right, versus like a traditional console, there's a lot more software in there. Like you have the touch screen, right? You have a lot more software these days in these products than you did before. And with software, you can make changes on the fly. Like, and I bet that's where this concept can come into like the FAA, where in order to adapt to these changes, which are beneficial. Like you could argue that, should we be making changes as a society? Should we allow such changes to be done in such a fast manner? I think it's probably a good thing, like just as long as it's properly maintained, right? So yeah, I see lots of analogs, like where I think the same can be said for like medical devices. A lot of them are a lot more software heavy, I think, these days than they probably were before. Like I see a lot of medical device manufacturers adding software-only components to their systems to do new functions, like AI functions is a big one. But yeah, like I certainly think that as an industry, we are headed to just kind of getting used to the concept of doing more changes more quickly. And in order
No,
to
it's
do
just, yeah, that makes so much sense what you're saying. But it seems like it's a combination of you as a software developer finding ways to speak to the regulatory agencies like this program that you pointed out, so that they can have something to grab onto. But it's also going to be things like the FDA deciding that it can use those tools, and that they give the FDA enough oversight and you enough accountability so that you can meet in the middle. But I was thinking that in terms of not only that, but as you can see, the software is not the only place where we're getting into real generative design changes, but software lends itself to it, doesn't it? I didn't think about that when I decided to tune in this morning, but pretty neat.
John, before we get to Patricia, and I see Michelle has her hand raised in the comments as well. You had a last slide where I think you wanted to attract some participants in something.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to show just like a quick demo of like how we do it. And really this slide, like if anyone of you guys are interested in like using our platform, we are trying to make this available for folks to use. I can certainly, I'd love to chat with you and kind of get your feedback about that.
Do you have something to show us now in terms of the demo?
I do. And in fact, this is good because while this demo goes, I can also take some other questions from you guys, because it does take a little bit, and I want to show a concept. So that AI agent kind of workflow that I'm talking about. This is not part of the project. This is just like a glimpse into the future, right? But kind of hopefully it puts it all into perspective. Why having a data model like this, I believe, would be a great asset. And why doing this philosophy of separating the presentation layer from the data model is going to be so powerful. So as you guys may know, currently Apple came out with the sleep apnea notification. And what I'm going to do here is take their publicly available document, which right now this is just a technical documentation about how they did their validation study.
Hmm.
We're going to feed this into AI and ask the AI to suggest, as a first pass, suggest requirements, user needs, and link them together. So I'm gonna kick this off, and then we're gonna watch this go, and I'll show you how I envision this is gonna happen. So in the future, think of the screen on your right as your AI companion. It's kind of like a coworker that you would delegate tasks to, and this coworker doesn't know how to write Word documents or interact with Word documents, but they do know how databases interact and how databases work.
Is the tool on your right proprietary to you?
That's correct. Tool on the right is proprietary. Tool on the left has some proprietary components to us, but these are our templates and our procedures that have been written for humans. But however, they will, I expect soon to be adopted to have AI assistance for certain parts of the process.
Many.
Works is because of these databases. So like,
Are you aware of any of your colleagues in industry working on using artificial intelligence for this process? Or do you feel that you guys are the first ones to attack this?
I mean, I've certainly seen and heard and also learned from people using AI tools such as ChatGPT in order to do those microtransactions I talked about before, can certainly be aided by AI. However, as far as I'm aware, this is the first that I've seen to really combine all of these microtransactions together into a process that has useful results out the other end. I think lots of AI tools we've used, I just kind of go back to just doing it by hand anyway, because I think they're like they don't really capture the process and the SOPs of that domain experience. But this is the first I've seen, at least, that I'm kind of biased because I kind of made this, but this is the first I've seen that seems to do it this well, because it's replicating the way I think about it. And that's built into the way that the AI operates.
That's funny. You basically said, like this one the best because it seems like I do.
It's really a bias.
Tautology, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's
This
true.
one's talking my language because, told what to say.
But the same strategy can apply to any SOP, like any way of doing it. I think the future is upon us where you can automate some of those sections by programming the AI agent in your design philosophy or someone else's philosophy. It doesn't need to necessarily be yours. And the way you do that is by providing it lots of examples about what's your best practice about how to write risk control measures for like an AI device. How would you teach someone in your organization that's more junior? How would you teach them to reflect the values and the know-how of your organization? That same philosophy is what you can use to train AI. And we're just at the very start of this transformation, but I do believe that is a way of the future. And by using a philosophy of agile regulatory documentation, like we see on the left, that will prep your organization to make best usage of this AI wave coming up in the future.
I'm thinking, marketing's my background as a marketer. If I invited you back to give a full demo, how would you finish this title? How I use AI to what? That would have medical device people say, oh, I would love AI to do that for me. What are the things that you're thinking through that you're most trying to have AI do for you right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a concrete example of where I think AI has helped us the most in our service delivery is the retrospective DHF, where there's already plenty of context and knowledge for the AI to churn through. In our case, that's going to be like technical documentation from the client, or like a code base, for example. And then the job is to then retroactively create a DHF for that product.
Because the company was delinquent in doing it properly the first time?
Well, lots of our clients are smaller, say, startups, and whenever that is the case, usually that is just
They didn't know what they didn't know, and now they have to go back.
It's also that, but probably like the startups that spent a lot of time and money and energy doing it from the first time probably ran out of money. Or I think it's a combination of things, but I think market forces and just other survival of the fittest, type kind of landscape. It just so happens that lots of folks that already built a working prototype, got funded on that prototype, are now in the position to get to think about FDA clearance. It's just
because they didn't know to do it the first time, or they didn't have the resources to do it.
Both. I think it's a combination of both.
I guess I'm trying to determine how big an idea this is that you're saying. There's, for 100 medical device companies, how many of them do you think need to retroactively create a DHF? 2? 10?
So if they're already on the market, I would say probably not that many. However, even at larger companies, like there are kind of venture studio type arms that are trying to build out new ideas. And I think that's where the retrospective DHF really comes into play. When we have a lot of R&D going on, you're not going to have design controls from the beginning, or probably most not. So there will be like a cutoff point where it's like, okay, now we're going to turn on design controls. Now let's catch up everything and do this.
York, I'm thinking he's talking areas of interest for you. Would you personally find inviting him back for a demo worthwhile for you?
Yeah, and also I think, I do software as well as hardware. And I could see this applying. I mean, startups in general, this is a great thing for startups because startups have horrible requirements, in general. I would say, 90% of them are terrible or non-existent. And this would be huge for a lot of them, not just on software, but even on hardware.
Well, I think you've just been invited back, Yujan, if you had a good time today.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I could go on about this stuff all day.
I bet you could, until your son starts crying.
I think we had one more question.
We actually have two. Patricia?
Hi, good morning. I actually have a background in regulatory, but I'm finishing up an AI boot camp through MSU. So this is super interesting to me. So thank you for presenting, and thank you, Joe, for having him.
Thanks,
Just
Sean.
a quick question. Oh, and thank you, Sean. I'm sorry. That's why you keep me in line. Thank you. But my question is for those who might not be comfortable or familiar with, transitioning to AI. I see a lot of companies will use something like Oracle Agile system and think like that's the greatest. I know it doesn't have that component to it. How do you convince them to use this? And would they be using this in concert with Oracle, or would they transition fully to your system?
Short answer, we don't try to try to convince them. I think it's too much of a difference in, like, it probably doesn't even really make sense. Like, I think where this really shines is I believe for smaller organizations, especially those that are getting started, that have a clean slate. I believe the larger organizations that already have something like Oracle, their best bet is to wait until Oracle, Google, or Microsoft would eventually roll out things like this. And I think that, I think tools like this on the cutting edge will always be a couple of years ahead, I think. But it'll take them longer to transition to this than if they just waited for the larger enterprises to catch up on some of these features. I don't know if that answered your question, Tricia.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So your market base would be mostly startups then, or smaller companies.
Startups, or really entities within larger companies that operate like startups. That can also happen, where perhaps they have a more lightweight system like this during the design development, the first product, and then this can be grandfathered into their main quality system, or they can just keep it at like the Word document layer. Like the system on the left does compile all this down into a common format, which are Word documents that everyone's used to. And, if you have a Word document export, it kind of forms like an API for legacy, or not, sorry, when I say legacy, but for pre-existing systems. It forms an API that can then be inputted into those systems. So like that kind of allows the smaller teams to remain agile in this process, to do things quickly, but also as a compatibility layer, an adapting layer to the larger organization's QMS. I haven't really done this kind of thing yet, but I don't see any reason why conceptually that should not be the case. Like, you could write scripts that would export this data model out into a format that the larger company would be able to consume, used to, for example. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
We weren't
Yeah,
able,
absolutely. Thank you.
we weren't able to really get into the results of this. So since we're at the top of the hour, maybe this is where we begin next time. Would you, Yujan, share in the chat your contact information with folks?
Yes, absolutely.
And just a show of hands, is there anyone on the call right now who would be interested in being one of his beta testers? Jorg, for starters. Okay. And someone put here in the chat. Oh, right, you did. Okay. So we have his email address in the chat. And thank you for a really interesting presentation. I mean, it was more than a presentation. It was a conversation about and introducing AI in a way that doesn't suck like you're saying.
Thank you. It was great.
Yeah. Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
Next week, we're going to have fan favorite Greg Grissett back for another conversation about intellectual property. And until then, this has been Joe Hage for Joe Hage Enterprises. Have a great week.
Thank you,
Joe.
so
Bye.
much.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.